Effective altruism is an emerging movement and a philosophy in the sense of an approach to life. That is a way in which some people are thinking about how they want to live their lives. Essentially, it's the idea that we should act so as to make the world a better place, but not just a slightly better place, but rather we should use whatever resources or abilities we have to do the most good that we can. And in order to decide what is going to do the most good that we can, we need to draw on evidence that is available and find more evidence where relevant that will enable us to see how some choices might do more good than other choices. So there is, if you like, an altruistic element of this, that is a concern to do good, which very often, though I don't know whether in absolutely all cases, but very often anyway, has a kind of an emotional basis, desire to see fewer people suffering, to reduce the amount of suffering that happens in the world, for example, but also a cognitive basis. You have to use your thinking and reasoning to find out how to do that. Effective altruism is the name also not just of this philosophical approach to how you want to live your life, but also the name of an emerging movement, particularly of younger people, particularly of people who have come of age since 2000, so the generation we call the millennials, but certainly not only of that. And some of the people I know in the movement are more like my age, and they've got involved and see it often as a way of reconnecting to values that perhaps they held earlier in their life. In pursuing their career and having families and all those other things, they may have somewhat lost touch with and want to reconnect with that again. So if you put effective altruism into Google now, you'll find quite a lot of websites. You find, for example, a Wikipedia page on it. You find effectivealtruism.org. None of these you would have found if you'd Googled that 5 years ago. They're all really quite new. So I think that effective altruism is an important movement, and I think it has the potential to transform the way we think about philanthropy. Generally speaking, people have a positive view of philanthropy, but it tends to be a kind of emotional warm glow feeling than something that is really based on good knowledge of the data of what you're achieving. There are studies of who gives to charities and what do they give and how much research do they do before they decide on their gifts. And the answer to the last question is, for the majority of people, zero. Most people do not do anything that could even remotely count as research before giving to a charity. It's more like a matter of receiving a glossy leaflet or seeing a TV ad that has an image that you like and deciding to give, or hearing that there's a humanitarian catastrophe in Nepal or in Haiti or in the Philippines and saying, I'll give to that, and not really thinking about, is this the best thing to do with my resources? How does it compare with other things that I might do? As I say, the majority on all of these surveys admit they do no research. The minority that do some research tend to do very superficial research. They tend to be worried that the organisation that they're giving to is basically a fraud. So they may look at the amount of the proportion of revenue that goes to administration and fundraising. Of course, if you do look at that and you find that 80 or 90% goes to administration or fundraising, then basically the organisation is a fraud and you shouldn't give to it. But that's very rare. And I doubt that the organisations that you would be thinking of giving to would be anywhere near that kind of category. So once you avoid that, you're talking about, well, one charity maybe 10% of its revenue goes to administration and fundraising, and another charity, maybe 30% of its revenue goes to administration and fundraising. Does that mean that the charity where only 10% goes to administration and fundraising is going to give you better value for your money than the other one? Well, the answer to that is no, not necessarily. That information just doesn't really tell you anything that is really relevant to what good do the programs do. Right? You may know that 90% of the revenue goes to programs in charity A and only 70% in charity B, but maybe that's because charity A cut back its staff so hard that it no longer really monitors or evaluates the effectiveness of the programs that it's funding. It just pushes out the money and hopes that those programs are going to do well. Whereas Charity B does keep good staff who travel to places where the programs are being implemented, looks at what they do, says in some case, yes, this is a good program, we should continue to fund it. Another place says, no, this is not achieving what we wanted, we should not fund it any further. And therefore, maybe the 70% actually does a lot more good with Charity B than the 90% does with Charity A. So you really need to think about those sorts of questions if you want to be an effective altruist.